So I wanted to record a quick video on how to check your heat pot to make sure that all of the wiper positions actually register. And I would typically do this with an ohmmeter, but not everybody has that. And if you have the StellarBeans kit, then you can just use what you already have. So turn on your roaster, then turn on the loft and set the loft to something that would loft maybe 1 pound of beans or 3 pounds or 4 pounds of beans if you have a larger one. And then hit start. And I'm going to close without saving. So we're going to start the roaster. So right now my loft is going. My roaster burner set to 0, and we just kind of let it stabilize. Then I'm going to go up to say 10. So we're going to add some heat. So we're going from 0 to 10. This may or may not add very much heat. And we wait for that to stabilize and see what happens. I can verify that I saw the servo turn the knob. But not very much, so let's go up to 20, which should be roughly a 2 or a 3 on the roaster, which, it shouldn't get too hot. But we want to add heat and see what it does. So we're starting to see the heat curve move. I'm going to let the temperature stabilize another minute or so. Let's see what it does until it flattens. And you can see the heat is climbing. At this point inside of the roaster, there's just the thermocouple and warm air blowing over it right now. Nothing too complex happening. We see the initial curve starting to level off, so I'm going to go up to 30 now and see if that responds. You can also disconnect the servo if you want and do this with your hand on the loft knob, or I'm sorry, on the heat knob. Turn it from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. You can even do half steps, 1 to 1.5, 2 to 2.5, and stopping at each half step if you wanted to do that and be real surgical with it. But I'm showing you how to see if every position on the heat pot is actually doing something. And I have seen cases where guys have dead spots on their heat pots, and that causes the PID to sort of whip back and forth wildly. One guy had a dead spot between 2 and 7. The heat pot did nothing. So whenever we turned the heat pot to 5, it would do the same thing that it was at 2 and the same thing that it was at 6. So only 7 to 10 did that heat pot respond. And the wipers on those heat pots wear out. So that's something to know. So this is a test that we did, and we could see that when roasting, that there was no difference between 2 and 7 on that heat pot. As you can see, I went from basically 10 to 20, 20 to 30. So we still have heat going up. I'm going to go 30 to 40. We should see another marked difference. If you see it stabilize, level off, or go down at any point during this process, you have an issue with your heat pot. I'm giving about a minute and a half to 2 minutes between each change. And if you really want to be sure that it's not the automation equipment and it is the pot, disconnect the automation equipment and use your hand like you used to before you got the equipment, and just turn the pot itself. So here we are about a minute and a half in. I'm going to go and do 50. All All right, let's go to 60. Let's say, for example, you made a change from 50 to 60 and you saw it start to flatten over that next minute and a half or 2 minutes. That would tell you that it's cooling at that point, that the heat didn't change, and it would flatten for a minute, then it would start to go back down, or it would flatten and it would stay flat because it is holding the settings from previous wiper position. So the fact that at each time you're seeing, a marked jump higher, that's telling you that it has a healthy heat pot. We're getting ready to change to 70 at the 8.5 minute mark here. Watch your bean temp up here as well. If these numbers go backwards, that should be something that is interesting as well. If it's oscillating maybe back and forth, or if it's oscillating wildly back and forth, that could be a thermocouple connector issue to the Yocto thermocouple. As you see, you see these nice, you can see it kind of come up and sort of stabilize, come up, you can see it sort of a little bit there, you can see it's just trying to relax. Right here it was trying to get sort of flat right about the time I changed it, which is good. That's why I changed every minute and a half. You see how it's flattening out here since I haven't changed it. So let's go right there. So let's go to 80. And again, you should see it push higher if the heat pot is working well and the wipers are working well. Now again, you would think at an 8 on the roaster you would see a ton of bean temperature heat, but it's just air. There's no thermal mass in there sort of keeping the heat in it, so it is just hot air blowing by, and that's fine. For reference, the roaster right now, I just got up and looked, says that it's at like 550 degrees in the throat, but by the time it's hitting the thermocouple, which is floating in the air, it's not quite as warm. So we see it starting to stabilize here again, which is fine. That's what you'd expect. And let's go to 90. Now let's go to 100. So that should be the far rightmost clock position on your heat potentiometer. And as you see, we have seen a fairly clean rise at every temperature change. We even saw it try to stabilize a couple of times, and that's what it will do if the pot rotation does not signal higher heat to the solid state relay. So if your curve looks something like that, I would venture to guess that your heat pot is probably okay. So it's kind of interesting, between 0 and like 20 or 0 and 2, there isn't a lot going on the heat pot, and between 9 and 10, as you can see, we're starting to kind of stabilize here. That's pretty much maxed out, so it's not gaining quite as quickly, but that is also normal as well. So I do hope that was helpful. If you wanted to check and make sure that your heat pot is operating correctly, and shoot some questions here in the group.